That's right, major milestone complete. On this week's episode of the Freemo build series, we finally have enough track laid to run a train. So welcome into Freemo layout update number 3. I really appreciate you all being here. If you're new to the channel, just take a second and hit that subscribe button. Would really appreciate you having you around here for the long haul. There was a lot that went into being able to run that first train. These first couple of clips here are showing just the process of laying the first couple feet of track, which is kind of the most critical few feet of track, as this is what's going to mate up to the module adjacent to mine, and we need to make sure that there's a reliable connection. Once I got that first few feet of track down though, however, I realized that this was a lot more complicated of a process than just laying track. I needed to be able to permanently affix this bridge in place, and that meant a lot of other things. That meant that this whole creek scene pretty much needed to be done. The first issue that I kind of ran into was the fact that the plywood that I put down for the base only went as far as the side frames of the module itself, which meant that the surface that I had in order to lay my water down on was not even as far as grain is concerned. There was differences in kind of the level. So I did make a decision to do something a little bit unique. I traced out the outline of the creek scene with some brown paper, and then I transferred the outline to a new piece of plywood that would reach all the way from one end of the side frame to the other, so that I had one complete, nice, smooth surface to work with. And let me tell you, much to my own surprise, as you know, those who watch this channel a lot know that I fly by the seat of my pants quite a bit, this first cut of plywood fit like a glove. I didn't have to do any modification after cutting the plywood, which I was completely overjoyed about. Once the plywood was cut, it was now time to go ahead and glue it down. You can see I used just about every heavy thing that I had down in the basement just to make sure that I glued this thing on nice and flat. Let it sit overnight, and everything came off nice and smooth. It looked great once everything was done. That's when the real fun started, and we got to do just a little bit of scenery, which honestly I'm a little bit overjoyed about. Scenery is my favorite part of the hobby, and I did not anticipate being able to do any on these Freemo modules until much later in the process. But we started here just by using a little bit of Sculpt-A-Mold to kind of hide the seams between the new piece of plywood and the embankments. And then, as a part of my Monday night live stream Talkin' Trains, we did a little bit more scenery work. I worked on the gravel embankment you see here, got that all installed, and also went in with some acrylic washes to recolor the rock to reflect what's actually in Batavia a little bit better. And if you're interested in Talkin' Trains, I stream just about every Monday from 7:30 to 9 p.m. right here on the channel, so be sure to tune in. There was still plenty of work to do after the stream was over though, and you can see me doing a little bit of that work here. You can see I'm putting down the texture layer on the creek scene itself. Now, the texture layer in this method is the trickiest part. If you're not careful, you get air bubbles, and unfortunately, I got air bubbles, which meant that I actually did this process, I think 3 times before I actually figured out what it was that I was doing wrong and avoided getting the air bubbles. It turned out that what I was doing wrong was really just not applying enough pressure to the sponge. I was applying it very lightly, and that caused a lot of super tiny micro air bubbles. Once I started using a reasonable amount of pressure, that issue seemed to go away, and I was left with much better results. So of course, right in the middle of the creek project, it was of course time for a nice big side quest, right? We ended up deciding as a group to modify the legs of our modules so that they fold in flat rather than being removable. This is what the finished project looks like. You can see that we added these cross members underneath just to keep things stable. Now, unfortunately, this process, even though it's going to benefit me greatly, did delay me about 2 weeks as far as the track laying and scenery is concerned. But with it out of the way, it was time to return back to focusing on the bridge. The bridge needed a bunch of weathering done before it was finally put in place, starting with the bridge tracks themselves. And the thing that stood out to me with these bridge tracks was the fact that there was a bunch of kind of sun-faded ties on the bridge. And so the first thing that I ended up doing was a nice acrylic wash to fade down the ties and make them look like they'd been on the bridge for quite a while. So I let that acrylic wash dry overnight. As you'll also see, in the meantime, I got a little bit more work done on the bridge itself, just doing a little bit of weathering to that to kind of try to match the prototype as best I can. And the next morning, I came back in and did a little bit more detail work to make it look like there had been some ties replaced, as the prototype kind of suggests that there was. I used a couple of different things to achieve that, but primarily I was using Tamiya panel liners in two different colors, brown and black, and you can see that it provided some really good results. With the weathering process done, it was time to make sure that the bridge was good for final fitment here. Just started by mocking it up in place one more time just to make sure everything was good, and then glued in the bridge tracks using a little bit of super glue, letting them dry with some 1, 2, 3 blocks on them for a little bit of weight, and then just letting them sit for a couple of hours just to make sure the glue dried properly. Once those bridge tracks were dry, it was time to start finally trying to fit the rails into the turnout here, and that means that we are really close to the final preparations for today's video. This little section in between the turnout and the bridge itself is probably the most tricky little section of track in this whole layout, because it needs to be Fremo mainline compliant as far as the turning radius is concerned. I had to be really careful here to make sure that everything went in according to my track plan, and the angle of the switch itself was correct. Overall, in the end though, I'm really happy with how this little section turned out. Ran this test car through it, everything's running smooth. Tested it out with the NMRA track gauge, everything looks good there. Got the joints all soldered up and secured down with a little bit of matte medium. Let that dry overnight, and that brings us to where we are now. So there you have it. We can now officially run a train on the Fremo modules. The process of doing so is a little less Fremo compliant than I would like it to be, as you can see here by these alligator clips that are just basically running DCC over from the main layout. But we've definitely still got our work cut out for us, that's for sure. It's still incredibly rewarding to be able to do this, to be able to finally run a train on these Fremo modules, and I'm really looking forward to the process as we continue to build the rest of these modules, because there's still plenty left to do. I really appreciate everybody tuning in and checking out the video. If you're new to the channel, again, I would love it if you'd subscribe. Plenty more Fremo content coming, along with more modular content in the near future, and as well as the main layout as well. So be sure to hit that subscribe button. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Hit the like button, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care, everybody.